Good evening and welcome to the Jackson, Mississippi Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated Lead Mentee Social Action Forum. Our forum is entitled Is Critical Race Theory All That Critical? And tonight we hope that you gained insight and information regarding critical race theory in the state of Mississippi. Just a few Zoom tips. We ask that you remain on mute throughout the webinar. And if you have any questions during the time of our panel, we ask that you put them in the Q&A section. If you would like to share information among each other or you think something is said has been a very good point, please put that information in the chat box. My name is Michelle Henry, and I am a 2022 lead mentee. Joining me tonight is Sora Cattle, who is also a 2022 lead mentee, who will introduce our panelists.
Good evening, everyone. I hope everything's going well, but if you all can hear me, please let me know. It seems that some of us, there are some who are not able to hear.
Yes, I just got a message that they did not hear any of the intro. So
Look, we just appreciate all of you on the call. Thank you so much for being here, for the panelists, the participants. We really appreciate you all for taking out the time this evening to work with us, even though you all can't hear me. Let me see. Let's see.
So if any of the sorors who have texted me said that they can't hear me, just please let me know whether or not you can hear me. Can anyone? Thank you. Thank you. So let's try it again. The best laid plans of mice and men are often led astray. So, welcome to the Jackson, Mississippi Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated Lead Mentee Social Action Forum. I am Michelle Henry, a 2021-2022 Lead Mentee, and we are so glad to have you here with us today. Our social action forum is focused on is critical race theory all that critical? And we are so very glad to have our esteemed panelists here to join us. Just to give you a few Zoom tips and housekeeping tips, please keep your phone muted at all times. And during the question and answer period, if we are allowed to unmute, then we ask that you check out for background noises behind you. Also, during the time that the presentations are being done, if you have any questions that you would like answers to, please place them in the Q&A section. But encourage our participants through utilizing the chat box when you hear something that is absolutely amazing. Joining us tonight as a co-panelist is Sora Cattle, a 2021-2022 lead mentee, who will introduce our panelists.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for joining us this evening. I will go ahead and introduce our panelists. Our first panelist would be Representative Christopher Bell. Christopher M. Bell, representative for Mississippi House District 65, has spent a lifetime acquiring experience around passionate and purposeful people strategy, culminating in the launch of Chris Bell Allstate Insurance Company in 2005 and the Bell Group, LLC, in 2011. Through his experience in education, Chris has developed a keen sense of marketing and sales expertise. He serves on several committees, including insurance, public health, tourism, banking and finance, and energy. Currently, he serves on the executive committee of the National Legislative Black Caucus of State Legislatures. His exposure to a wide array of business cultures and professionals ensures his comfort in working with diverse organizations. Chris continues to build a strong contact network through local membership in several organizations, including currently serving as board president of the Institute of the Advancement of Minority Health, former board member of trustees for Leadership Greater Jackson, member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and Anderson United Methodist Church. Chris earned his bachelor degree of science from Jackson State University, and we are happy to have him on this call. Our next panelist will be Darius Adams. Originally from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Darius Adams is a graduate of the University of Mississippi with a degree in public policy and political science. During his time at the university, he was involved in voter registration and voter education efforts with the on campus student government. In February of 2019, he led a successful march to remove the Confederate statue from the heart of campus. During the summer of 2020, Adams co organized one of the largest protests in Mississippi history that resulted in the removal of the state's Confederate embedded flag. Adams has worked on local, statewide, and presidential campaigns and political initiatives that work toward fully funding public education, expanding Medicaid, and restoring the African American vote. Currently, he is a first year law student at Howard University School of Law, where he was elected to serve as a 1L class president. So, well, currently serves. Let me be very clear. Next, we will have Brittany Brown. Brittany Brown is an award-winning multimedia journalist from Mississippi. She is currently a reporter with the Gulf State Newsroom, NPR's Southern Hub for Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. Brittany covers criminal justice issues in 3 states and is based at Mississippi Public Broadcasting in Jackson, Mississippi. Before joining the Gulf States Newsroom, Brittany was the inaugural Emerging Reporters Fellow with Mississippi Today, where she covered Mississippi's criminal legal system before being hired full-time by Mississippi Today as the criminal justice reporter. Brittany is completing her master's thesis project in Southern Studies at the University of Mississippi. Her reporting and research interests include injustice, incarceration, race, and ethnicity in the South, oral history, and documentary storytelling about Black and Latino communities. She is a proud member of the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting, Investigative Reporters and Editors, and she's a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Brittany graduated from the University of Mississippi with a bachelor's degree in journalism in 2019. And last but not least, Calvert White. Calvert White is a junior social science education major at Jackson State University. Born in Jackson and raised in Clinton, Mississippi, much of his work has been in and for the capital city. Though a future educator by profession, Cal's passion lies in community organizing and political activism. By creating school and community initiatives, he hopes to cultivate safe spaces for youth in the Jackson metro area. In June 2020, he and other student activists coordinated Mississippi's largest protest since 1964, calling for the removal of Mississippi's previous state flag and other Confederate symbols. Calvert was featured in the New York Times, Good Morning America, the Southern Poverty and Law Center, and more. At Alcorn, Calvert served as the president of the school's NAACP chapter and fellow with Mississippi Vote's Democracy in Action program, working to register, educate, and mobilize students to vote. At Jackson State University, Cal is currently a member of the Fannie Lou Hamer Pre-Law Society and currently serves as a teaching fellow at Mississippi Museum of Art as a gallery educator in training. So tonight we would just like to learn from you all and how we can make an impact in our community, including those participants who would also like to have a question. So first, I will start off with the question of what is critical race theory?
Representative Bell, you want to jump in? Or?
Whoever you want to go first. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Okay. So critical race theory is an academic concept that is more than 20, 30, nearly 40 years old, older than myself and many of us on this call. The core idea of critical race theory is that it's identifying race as a social construct, and that racism in itself is embedded in the legal system. It's embedded in the policies that we see in the United States. It's really just embedded in everything that we see and that is connected to Black people and our experience in the United States. So critical race theory is just showing how we ended up where we are, because we didn't, get to the bottom of the social class and financial class, economic class by happenstance, right? There was an event that happened, a big event, and critical race theory shines light on that event.
That sums it up. Except for you made one mention. You said most of us on this Zoom. Just want you to add.
I knew when I started that, I said, well, I already said it, so let me just keep going.
No, but you are correct. I mean, it's everything what you said it is. I mean, it was taught in law schools during the 70s, and it's basically just a teaching or a theory of how, as Jerry said, how minorities have been put in a hole, so to speak, with certain laws that have been created by those in power at the time. So you are correct, Jerry.
Yeah, and a lot of people, and I know we have to move on besides, but a lot of people connected to Nikole Hannah-Jones and the work that she has done. And while the work she has done is amazing, and she's here at Howard, had a chance to meet her a couple months ago. Like I said, critical race theory has been here. This isn't a new concept. Some people are just now learning about it. But the scholars, like Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw and Richard Delgado, amongst others, are the individuals who kind of started dissecting this idea and creating parallels of what we understand now as critical race theory.
Right.
I would also like to add, and first off, thank you, Michelle and Lasias, for having us. You heard Jarius mention Derek Bell, and I think a lot of people may not know that in a way, critical race theory as a framework sort of has its roots in Mississippi. Derek Bell actually supervised over 300 school desegregation cases here in Mississippi. And so, of course, we know there's a lot of history in our state, a lot of activism, and of course, the roots of the long Black freedom struggle is right here in this state. And so as we're talking about critical race theory and just hearing all of this sort of misinformation and cloudiness around what it actually is as a legal framework, I also want to highlight the fact that in a way, critical race theory has its roots right here in Mississippi.
Which is a perfect segue, Brittany, because our second question is there a mischaracterization of critical race theory? And I'd like you to answer that for us.
Well, I can speak to that more so from my reporting experience. Earlier this year in January, I actually covered a open hearing with the Mississippi Department of Education, where they invited the public to come and hear proposed changes to the social studies standards. And I think the best way to sort of characterize and describe what that moment was like, and this hearing was in January, at the beginning of this year. Now, at the time, that those changes to the standards were pretty procedural. MDE had already been working on updating the standards, and it was already actually in place about 8 months, really a year before the hearing was. But it really all came to a head when MDE published those standards, those proposed changes to the standards, and got a lot of feedback from the public. A lot of folks were saying, hey, we feel like, you're trying to erase critical race theory, or you're trying to erase like Black history and different forms of history, when really it was already a procedural moment that MDE was seeking out anyway. And so I got a chance to sit in on that hearing, and it was a very tumultuous moment because over 60 people were slated to speak from all across the state of Mississippi, including some elected officials. And a lot of folks, being up there on the podium really did not know what critical race theory is. And also critical race theory has nationally sort of been scapegoated as this idea of, and we'll sort of get to that when we talk about what Senate Bill 2113 is, but it's sort of been scapegoated as this idea of schools are teaching children that, you're inherently a bad person or inherently a good person based on your race, when that is not what critical race theory is at all. And that's also not what teachers are teaching in the classroom, right? So at that moment when the State Department of Education was hearing from parents, like I said, it was tumultuous, but a lot of times, people don't really realize that you can actually have your voice heard and express concerns and see what, your student's teacher is teaching by going to your local school board, by going to your child's school, talking to the principal, talking to the teachers. So it's really it's really not sort of what it's become. So I would definitely say it's mischaracterized, absolutely. And actually, no school, no public grade school, K-12, is teaching critical race theory in anywhere. There's actually only one official critical race theory class being taught in the state of Mississippi, and that's at the University of Mississippi School of Law. Because, as we heard Darius and Representative Bell just say, it is a legal framework. And so critical race theory has very much so been mischaracterized and sort of misrepresented as sort of this other idea that people are not really wanting to say what it is that they're really trying to say, you know? So.
So I will add that this misconception it has been extremely blown out of proportion, what critical race theory is, and it's confused a lot of people. It's become very partisan and very is a racial divide to it when it shouldn't have to be, right? Like we are not taught true Black history and what has happened to Black people in this country over the last 401 years, in this country. And this is the opportunity not only to teach that to people, but as I mentioned before, show how we got to where we are. And those who are in the opposition are afraid of it because they know when Black folks are educated, when Black folks, are empowered, things are going to change. And a lot of people benefit from the system that we're in right now. A lot of people, say that they don't want their children, as Brittany mentioned, they don't want their children feeling guilty and crying at school and being blamed. No one's blaming children for what has happened over the past. It almost has nothing to do with us, right? It's literally educating us on what has happened in the past. And I think it's critically important. Whether they teach it or not in schools, my kids gonna learn about it, and any child that I ever have under my wing in my house is gonna learn about it because it's important, right? Like you have to understand where you came from to really know where you're going.
Yeah, if I can add to that point, to Jerry's and Brittany's point, as a matter of fact, so I think that it's really important that we really hone in on what CRT is, and really talk about how it is a framework. I think that if we kind of break that down a little bit, we can it kind of gives us some insight. So theoretical framework essentially is like an organized group of concepts that incorporates like existing theory. So nowhere in that does it necessarily tell us what to think. It just kind of gives us a vehicle to arrive at these notions that are kind of more equitable, if that makes sense. So theory, critical race theory is not a social movement or a linear like organization of ideas. It's kind of like if when you see a cube for the first time in relation to like a square, it kind of gives race more dimension. It kind of gives us a clearer lens to see it through. It's like a vehicle to think and judge more accurately. It gives us, and really by us I mean lawyers, another way to give racism the depth that it greatly demands, and analyze just how big of a societal impact it's played over generations and centuries of a nation's forming of laws and social decorum.
Thank you. That was great. Well, we move on to the next question. And speaking, I know of several of you referenced January, and we just wanted to speak on, what prompted the walkout of Black legislatures in January of this year. Representative Bell, you could speak on that.
Yeah, I watched them walk out, and at the time of the debate of the bill, it was close to lunchtime, and I figured that's why the Senate walked out, because they're normally hungry at lunchtime. But seriously, they were tired of listening to those people mischaracterize CTR, bash Black Lives Matter, bash our past. It was a disgrace to some of those members, including the white members in the Senate on the Democratic side. And minority leader, Derek Simmons, told me that they just didn't want to dignify a vote with those individuals in that room. Now, what happened subsequently after they walked out of the room, the lieutenant governor came back in, but that's the whole nother deal. The lieutenant governor didn't even preside over the CTR debate. He walked out of the room and let the Senate Pro Tem preside over that. The chairman of that committee didn't want to preside over the bill. That's the misconception that a lot of people don't realize, that neither House nor Senate Republicans really wanted this bill. It was a small group of individuals that wanted this bill to come out. They indicated that the reason why they wanted CTR so they can go back to their communities and say, look, we've done something. We've killed CTR, and please reelect us again and forget about us voting to change the flag. And that was the consensus of every Republican that I talked to on the House side, every last one of them.
And, you know, I was not there. I'm not a representative or a senator, but I have a lot of friends that are in the Senate and House of Representatives. And after that happened, I may have been in class or something, and I saw it, and people were texting me, and I was like, you know, what's going on? Something always going on. And after talking to some of them, I mean, they're kind of sick of it. You know, our elected officials, especially those who look like us, who are championing our ideas in the state legislature, they put up with a lot, more than I probably could have. With, you know, I truly believe reasonable minds can disagree, and you can come to, you know, conclusions or settle disagreements amicably, which they do often. But this time, I think it cuts really deep, right? Like, you can't just lie. you can't just use lies as in fear mongering to your base and expect me to, you know, me as in a senator or representative who's you know, knows the truth about critical race theory, to just sit and listen. At some point, enough is enough, and you got to take a stand against that type of rhetoric. As Representative Bell said, a lot of them folks, right, are being pressured into thinking a certain type of way, voting a certain type of way, and this is where the political piece comes in. Trying to get reelected, being threatened to having their district drawn. I mean, it all happens on every level, you know, and in every state. But of course, this situation is one I feel like needed to happen, because when you don't have the majority in the House or in the Senate, you know, you got to use your voice somehow. And I think that the progressives, Democratic, Black folks, or whatever you want to categorize them as, stood up and made their voices heard.
Which is an amazing thing for our legislators to do, especially in today's time and when they're outnumbered. So for us who are sitting back at home, who don't have the luxury of reading all of the pages of a Senate bill, can you all share with us exactly what the Senate Bill 2013 state?
In a nutshell, I'm gonna read it to you what I remember from it, because I did not print the bill out. But just in a nutshell, it just basically stated that no public institution of higher learning, community college or junior college, school district, charter schools shall direct or otherwise compel students to affirm or adopt any of the following tenets, that any sex, race, ethnicity, religion, or national origin is inherently superior or inferior. It's the same language that they put in the majority of the bills that are going around the country from a group called ALEC. They are basically a Republican think tank that provides model legislation, and they basically cut and paste and send this stuff out and have people to vote on it. And sometimes they don't even read what's in there. You have some bills that come from ALEC and they'll have the state of Oregon on them, or Louisiana, and it's a Mississippi filed bill. So I mean, it's backwards. It's not useful. We didn't ask for it. No schools in the state of Mississippi teach it. It's too complex for K through 12. So it's just, again, like I said before, it was a waste of time. There's some red meat for those folks in, and I don't want to offend anybody, but like Jones, Laurel, Pearl River County, places like that, Corinth, that you have these people that feel insecure about the changes that have been taking place over the past couple of years with respect to the changing of the flag and just moving Mississippi forward. And that's all this bill is about. And it, has no place in our history books, and it definitely has no place in our laws.
As Representative Bell said, the legislation that they bring forth is not original at all. Sometimes they forget to delete the other name state. I mean, how really? We see it with critical race theory. We see it with voter suppression laws. We see it with, what they try to push with educate. They just the buddies call them up from Georgia, or Texas, or other states where they're having similar problems, and they just send it through their emails. They copy paste, send it. They're not writing this. Half of them ain't reading it, and so it's sad. It really is, and the people, especially the Black folks in Mississippi, are suffering because of it. But
and I forgot one thing that it doesn't even mention. It doesn't mention CRT in the bill. It's just in the explanation of the bill, what the bill says. It does not even mention CRT, and that was one of our arguments on the floor. It was like, why are we even going through this process? And it's not a true CRT bill, which makes it even that more dangerous, because now you can have someone saying that they're offended by going to. I asked this question on the floor. Does this stop school children from going to the Civil Rights Museum? And the chairman that handled the bill said no. Well, he says no, but you can have a child that goes to the Civil Rights Museum and they go by and look at all the lynchings on the wall, on those pillars, and feel insecure about what has happened in the past. And boom, now you have a lawsuit. You have a school being sued for teaching CRT, and the only thing they're doing is taking a field trip. So it's a huge, it's disappointing that we have to deal with stuff like that.
Well, this would be a perfect segue. I know Calvert and Representative Bell, you all could probably answer this question. So in Mississippi, critical race theory is not taught in any K through 12 school districts. So why was it, so important to pass legislation banning it? And I know we just talked about it, but I want to continue hearing your thoughts on that. I did see a few people send that question similar to that.
Okay, I'll go again. It's like I said before, it was well, first of all, I can't speak to why it was necessary to pass this bill. I can't, because then I'm a part of the problem. But what I can say is, from the conversations that I've had with those individuals, were so afraid of their flag vote that they were afraid or are afraid of losing their seats. And they had to bring something back to their districts that showed that they were on board with squashing Black Lives Matter, CRT, and anything that is positive about minorities participating in the state of Mississippi on any level, whether it be education or in business. That's one of the main conversations that I've had with folks in this building. A lot of them did not want it, but they had to have something to take home with them. And you had some, if you looked at the vote, some Republican members didn't vote. Some didn't even show up for like 2 days because they knew the vote was coming, and they rather sit at home rather than to take that vote or be forced into taking that vote. So I mean, it's unfortunate again, but like the gentleman from the Gulf Coast told me about a bill I was working on for the city of Jackson, and he pretty much said he's gonna kill it. And he just said, it is what it is. So, that's the mentality up here for some folks.
And I'll say, with the passage of Senate Bill 2113, Mississippi, last time I checked, became the 15th state to pass the 15th state, across our 50 states to pass a quote unquote critical race theory ban law. So clearly it's not just a Mississippi issue. This is clearly representative of a larger what you may call movement that's happening in this country right now. And I did want to go for a moment back to the previous question, if you will, of breaking down what Senate Bill 2113 actually says. Like Representative Bell said, critical race theory is not mentioned at all in the law. It actually was just referred to as critical race theory prohibit while it was going through the House and the Senate. But additionally, what makes this law especially concerning is that part of it actually includes that the Mississippi Department of Education can withdraw funds from schools that are caught, quote unquote, red-handed teaching these tenets that they say you cannot teach. And groups like the ACLU here in Mississippi have actually said that that is really concerning because, number one, there's really no mechanism stated or no protocol stated in this law as far as who or what body is actually enforcing this law being followed. So it really leaves it up to individual school districts to handle it, individual teachers, principals, so on and so forth. So it really is, in a way, leading into treacherous territory. But also what makes it additionally concerning is that it extends beyond K-12 public schools into, as you heard Representative Bell mention, charter schools, community colleges, universities, and Mississippi has a very, very robust community college and university system. And so it's really at this point, we're at the top of a very slippery slope. And, it's really concerning to see what the potential impacts of this will be long term. There's one more point I wanted to mention, but I can't remember right now. If it comes back to me, I'll just chime back in. But yeah, those are just some additional. Oh, that was the last thing I was going to mention. Michelle, I know in your question you were asking, like, for those of us who don't have the luxury to read pages and pages of a bill or a law, Senate Bill 2113 is what, a page or two long? 4 pages. It's not long at all. It is not long at all. Just to give you an idea, again, of sort of how one-dimensional the law itself is. And for me, it's very telling to hear about ALEC and about these Republican think tanks that are sort of, spreading this sort of legislation across the country. And again, like I said, going back to that original point of Mississippi, again, last I checked a few weeks ago, becoming the 15 states have passed a law like this. So this is not just a Mississippi issue, but this is clearly something on a larger scale that's happening across the country that not only us on this call and listening in need to be paying attention to, but we need to be keen on this across the country.
I'm gonna tell you why they want to ban it, and Representative Bell said it nice, but I'm gonna say it this way: most of us have something that goes from the top of our head down to the back. That's called a spine, a backbone. A lot of representatives and senators don't have backbones when it comes to making decisions. They can be convinced, they can be bought out, they can be, and they say they're doing it for their constituents, but the reality is, their main goal is to get reelected. And for some of them, if that means voting against what they say, they disagree with, but you can't tell me that I'm actually for this, but you vote this way. Nah, player, that's not how that goes. That's not how that works. Because the reality is these votes are going to be in history. Right? I can search votes from 2030 for the flag. We can look at everyone who voted, whether they here or elected or not. And it's sending a bad message to young people in Mississippi. We wonder why young people leave in Mississippi. It's sending a bad message to voters of Mississippi. Why Black folks not voting in Mississippi because they are not believing in the system and not believing that the people they are electing are really fighting for them. And there's some context to that. And, the numbers are skewed in certain areas. But I think that's the reason. And until we get past that, some of these folks just need to be sent to the house.
Thank you for that. You all have mentioned that Senate Bill 2013 that's been signed into law by Governor Reeves does not mention critical race theory, and that So since it doesn't mention critical race theory, can it actually be used to ban critical race theory from being taught in K through 12 schools and universities in Mississippi? I did hear you say that this law gives MDE the authority to withhold funding. So can it be an opportunity for for the state to withhold funding to already underfunded school districts in the state of Mississippi?
So let me go ahead and jump on that real quick. And it's a short answer. I don't foresee MDE even bothering with this issue because they know the truth. Ole Miss is going to continue to have the CRT class. This is not going to stop them because, again, this bill doesn't mention CRT. So I don't foresee it being a issue with MDE or Ole Miss, but the issue comes in with where you have a parent that it may be offended or their child may be offended. That's where the issue I see coming in. It opens up a Pandora's box of a ton of potential lawsuits. Majority of them will be frivolous, but at the end of the day, that's my main concern. Not with respect of MDE withholding funding, because there's no curriculum for it. So
And I think most public school districts in the state of Mississippi, even if they do have leadership who wants to, explore the idea of teaching it, won't, because, it'll be hard for whoever is the first school district to do it. They'll be all over the news and getting all kind of hate. The school districts don't want what will probably come with it, being the first one to do it. And, teachers and first of all, teachers still ain't being paid enough. I know they got a pay raise, and we happy about that because it's been a long time coming. But the teaching profession is so important. None of us will have any degrees that we have if it wasn't for a teacher. K through 12 teacher. You have a K through 12 teacher longer than you in college, longer than you in law school, doctorate degree, or whatever. I don't think anyone from K through 12 is going to risk, putting their school district or funding from Mississippi Department of Education by teaching critical race theory. And it's unfortunate because I think that it will be an amazing class and very necessary to provide some context of how we got where we are.
Calvert, we can't hear you.
Mr. White, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
I think while Calvert is getting his audio fixed, I did want to chime in and say say that, to kind of answer a little bit more of your question, Michelle, about, what can we expect to see here in Mississippi. I think it's important to look at what other states are doing and how they are mechanizing their versions of these quote unquote critical race theory bans. All right. I think it was in the state of Virginia recently that they sort of instituted some sort of system where students and teachers could report, students and parents could report teachers for teaching any sort of ideals that may fall. Again, now this is all untrue because we have already defined what critical race theory is for you, right? But falling under the guideline or umbrella of what people can sort of, in a way, scapegoat as what they feel or believe critical race theory is. While from my understanding, that sort of system is not in place in Mississippi at the moment. It's just always very telling to see what other states do and how other states fall in line. So just keep an eye on, any national news related to quote unquote critical race theory. Look into Virginia. It's some news reports out there about that sort of reporting mechanism. And I would not be surprised if we saw other states fall in line. And so sort of that's where I'm kind of interested in doing my research as a journalist is, trying to get ahead of that, because if that is something that schools or individuals are trying to institute here in Mississippi, then we need to make sure we have a clear, very, very clear, crystal clear understanding of what that is, how that will be instituted, so on and so forth. So the bill itself, law now, doesn't really have any teeth, but it kind of leaves it wide open. So it's very vague and it can either go one way or the other.
Well, thank you for that. Well, next we can go on and I guess just ask, how can state laws seeking to limit teachings on race miss vital context? I know you all have briefly touched on that, but I see Mr. White has joined us again, and I'll repeat the question. How can state laws seeking to limit teachings on race miss vital context? Cal, Mr. White, or Brittany? You can.
I guess I'll go. I mean, it's not a hard question to answer, but it's I don't know. The state of Mississippi is a different beast. It always has been throughout history. It's always been the place you love, but also the place you love to hate. And, with the history and the things that individuals have gone through before I've gotten here, before any of us have arrived here, is important. And you have a lot of people that like to suppress those thoughts and those actions of the past. The Clinton Massacre comes to mind. A lot of people didn't know about that. After the emancipation, you had thousands of African Americans in Natchez that were killed in the Devil's Punch Bowl. They were sent down there to rot. You had a lot of elected officials that were Black in the city of Vicksburg, Ocean Springs, all the way up to Byhalia, Mississippi, in that area. You had a lot of African American elected officials there. And I'm trying to remember the date, so don't hold me to it. But, you had riots and insurrections of white people because Black folks were being elected to seats and were starting to build up their family lineage by owning property and things of that nature. So, I mean, I really can't speak to why they would want to suppress all that. But, I mean, that's just Mississippi, and that's just the thought process, I guess.
Yeah, and those are just the stories we know about, right? Across this country. I think about it often. There's so many stories that we don't know about. I was thinking about the Tulsa Massacre. I think we had a speaker come, and she was talking about her grandmother who had some type of connection there, and was telling this story about how they used to come into the Tulsa Massacre. They came in, burned down the houses, was shooting and a lot of violence, and they would steal the women. They would kill the men and steal the jewelry that the Black women had. And imagine walking down the street and a white woman has the ring that your husband saved up all, it's that type of emotion. And that's just one example. Thinking about this all over the country, right? They say that white kids shouldn't be listening to this and hearing this, but I'm like, if Ruby Bridges at 6 years old, who was born in Tylertown, Mississippi, right, was old enough to experience what she experienced from grown folks, your child ain't old enough to listen, to learn about it at 13 and or maybe 18, 20, right? So, when you think back, a lot of my classmates, I went to Hattiesburg High School in Hattiesburg, predominantly African American. And the communities that some of my classmates came from, there are reasons our communities look like that, right? In the 1930s, government officials literally drew lines around areas deemed poor financial risks. and often explicitly due to the racial composition of the area. And banks, as a result, took that data and refused to offer mortgages to Black people in those areas. That has a lasting impact economically on our communities, right? So this is so much bigger than what folks are trying to make it out to be. This is educating us and white folks who just don't know. There are actually some white folks out there that want to know. They want to help. They want to understand, but we experience it every day, right? I can't come home and take this off, and my skin is still black when I wake up, when I get in the shower, all of it. So I can't go back and forth. They don't have that experience, right? And this is the opportunity we have to educate them. And I guarantee when the truth is being told, about critical race theory, we'll see a shift because we've been through some things in this country.
Hey y'all. I'm sorry I jumped out. There you go. Okay, good. First of all, let me reiterate that critical race theory is not taught in any public school aside from Ole Miss in the entire state of Mississippi. That's like 1,000 public schools, 23 public colleges, universities. There's only one class, 743 critical race theory. I'm a social science education major at JSU. I have not taken one class that has told us about CRT. At Alcorn, I was not taught one class that said anything especially about CRT. So we are fighting an invisible monster here. Like we are really, really just swinging and punching at the air right now, y'all. And on top of that, I think that the government is flexing their muscles as far as what they can and can't get done. Because I don't know if y'all remember, but we just had a popular vote about a medical marijuana initiative that passed overwhelmingly. And they shot that right out of the sky. Medicaid, even pay for teachers, they've been dragging their feet, for months, and then just all of a sudden, just like that, they got something passed. So I think that really speaks to their ignorance. It's really willful ignorance at that. So I think like as an aspiring social studies teacher, that it really murkies the water about what we can and can't teach, what we can and can't talk about, what traumas we choose to unpack, for our students. If we're talking about fighting, state brain drain and keeping students in Mississippi and jobs and, money in Mississippi, and we can't even have a discussion and sit down and dictate what exactly CRT is, one, how it would even be, employed in K-12 education too, and then three, how that would even, manifest itself to make better global citizens. I really just feel like we're really just swinging here.
And I think I'll wrap all of this to say, sort of going back to what Darius and Representative Bell were talking about in terms of the deep racial strife and history that exists across the country, but especially and really primarily right here in Mississippi. If we don't learn about our history, we're bound to repeat it. But another thing that I think is kind of getting lost in translation in the midst of all of this is when you have a lack of people who are sort of expanding their minds, expanding their sort of body of thought. In a way, you sort of have a body of politically suppressed people who do not know, their history, people who are not open to being challenged in their own thoughts and what they grew up believing and knowing, and sort of, hearing what Darius was saying about, the history of gerrymandering or the history of not lending money to, aspiring Black homeowners or Black businesses, or even race riots where Black districts were burned to the ground, right? If we don't know that history, then that gives people the opportunity to look around our city and our state today and say, oh, well, people are doing this to themselves. When really, this is a long long, purposeful, and ingrained history that is leading to this current moment. And so when you take all of that into account, then it makes sense, the fact of the matter that, in a way, it's sort of really robbing people of their own sort of educational development, their sort of educational evolution and understanding of the world, of society, and their own political development too. Because, I live in the city of Jackson, and I would say, the comparison is nowhere more glaring than here. You can be in Jackson one minute and drive over into Clinton, and it's totally different. You can be in Hinds County one minute and drive over to Madison County. It's totally different. You can be in Hinds County and drive over to Rankin County. It's totally different. Why? And so there's an entire body of people out there who believe like, oh, well, this is the result of people doing this to themselves, or any number of reasons, right, that people like to spout. When really it goes back to history. It goes back to what it is that we've been talking about on this Zoom call the entire time. So this is not, what we're living through right now is nothing new. It's just a result of what we've seen throughout history time and time again.
And Ms. Brown, that is a perfect segue into, has critical race theory been thrust into the spotlight by misinformation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because people don't know what critical race theory is. People don't know that Derek Bell is the godfather of critical race theory, as Calvert was saying earlier, just of what a framework is. I think he used the metaphor that really kind of helped me understand it a little bit better and be able to describe it to people of the cube versus the square. It's been misrepresented so much, and that in a way it doesn't even mean now what it originally was conceptualized as in the mid 1970s, with leading lawyers, thought leaders, scholars, so on and so forth, really bringing this forth.
So there's a plus side of it being politicized and taken out of context. More people are learning about it, whether they want to or not. We're having this conversation because of it. But then there's this miseducation, as Brittany mentioned, that folks, even if they're given the information, it's going to be a group of folks that ain't going to believe it, going, decide to go whatever news source they want to go to get what they want to hear. There are a lot of videos on on TikTok, online, of folks deciding to vote for certain elected officials, not just in state legislatures, but the governor of Virginia when that race was going on. They interviewed a man and they said, "Why are you voting for X person?" And he said, "Because he'll make sure that critical race theory is not taught." No, he'll get rid of critical race theory as if it was being taught already. And the interviewer asked him, "Well, what is critical race theory?" He said, "Well, that don't matter. I just know that it's bad." "Well, how do you know it's bad?" So then he wanted to stop doing the interview then because he was looking crazy. But they don't know. A lot of people don't know. So I think it's important that we continue to have conversations about it, continue to press it, no matter what these state legislatures do, right? They told us that we couldn't take the flag down many years ago. Keep pushing, and keep applying pressure. They'll give in.
Thank you. And we would just like to go ahead and answer a few questions from participants. So one participant asks, does the legislation affect private schools?
Yes and no. Charter schools are considered semi-private as they select their own students or what have you. But private schools can teach whatever they want. And 9 times out of 10, they're not teaching anything near critical race theory.
Not at all. And I think that kind of speaks to the problem we have now of Mississippi kind of privatizing, education, and that kind of is kind of how we got there. This, started from white flight academies, and so every time there is a pertinent issue that pops up, Mississippians kind of just build a wall around themselves and their children and kind of just pack up shop. So private schools are not affected at all. They can teach whatever they want to teach, how they want to teach it, and so the rest of us are kind of stuck having to deal with it.
Thanks. So we have another question. Without a more concrete definition, what is the criteria for what counts and what doesn't count as CRT? Where is the line drawn, and why do we have to draw one to begin with? I can repeat the question if you need me to.
Brittany, you want to take that, or you want me to take it?
Please.
I think you answered it earlier, but I mean, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's what we were talking about earlier. We don't know, because this bill is so, if she's talking about this Senate bill, is so ambiguous. You don't know where the line. There is no line. It's whatever anybody can come up with in their mind. So as far as why are we having it, where do you draw the line? What was the other part of the question? But you're on mute now.
Where does the line begin?
Yeah, so yeah, we don't know where the line begins. The line can begin that my child was taught that some Africans came over in a boat and on their own free will and worked as in the land for us and whatever. And they go home and realize that it was a lie. Now they feel guilty. So, I mean, it's a cluster, and I don't want to just say cluster, but it is a cluster. And like I said earlier, it's an unneeded piece of legislation, not just only in Mississippi, but throughout the country. We stated over and over, nobody's teaching this. It's a law school course. It's theory. Children will not understand it. And it's just unnecessary. It's something to distract us. That's what I said earlier in the year. You give us this piece of meat to go after and try to battle and stop. But on the other end, you're working on something else that's more detrimental to us. So, I mean, you have to focus on the main goal, and that's protecting. I'm talking myself and my colleagues in the Legislative Black Caucus in the Democratic Party. To focus on representing our people as best we can, and fighting the bad bills and trying to kill those and uplifting the good bills that are out there.
One last question I see in the chat. Someone asked, "What do you think these coordinated attacks from the right will have on the upcoming midterm elections?" Representative Bell, or anyone.
Well, I mean, it's critical to them. They're trying to gain seats, not only in Congress, but 2023, we come up for re-election in the House and Senate. So those individuals are trying to save their seats. We had just gone through redistricting, where they provided a map to us that still keeps them in the majority, which is unfortunate. We presented an alternative map that shows that we can gain an additional 9 seats, maybe 10 seats on the Democratic side. It was rejected. These are the things that I was talking about earlier about you focus on something different, and then in the meantime, they're coming around with something more serious and detrimental to our people. And these are the things that we got to constantly, consistently fight to stop.
And I think that, Senator, that ties directly in with our last question, which is critical race theory has become a dog whistle among Republicans to mobilize the base. You kind of answered some of that for us. And what are some other reasons why that is happening?
Republicans want to stay in charge. They want to continue to spew fear to their uneducated voters that think that they're a part of the Republican Party, and they're actually not. You have, I threw out Laurel and Pearl River County. We have members from those counties, and it's just unfortunate to hear the conversations that they have, especially from Pearl River County. It's all about fear, and it's all about trying to drive their forces. There was I know we were talking about CRT, but I was having a conversation last week. Matter of fact, it was yesterday. And this is one of the things that Senator Chisholm on the Senate side was arguing about her district, her Republican district, that was transformed into a Democratic district through redistricting. And I'm going to throw out this quote that she mentioned. Senator Chisholm says she's concerned about the number of districts that have been considerable increased in BVAP, and Republicans should unite to save every Republican district in the state. Now, that's a bold call to the Ku Klux Klan by a public official. Those are the things that we deal with up here. And those are the things that we're trying to get as many people out to vote, register to vote, and get some of these people out of the office that don't need to be here.
I'm trying to. Oh, go ahead, Brittany. Go ahead, Brittany. I'll go after you.
I was just going to say, I think it's important too, in the midst of all of this, for people to really try hard to look past how the smoke and mirrors with that sort of being upheavaled with this sort of quote unquote critical race theory wave that's happening across the country, right? And really take a purposeful and pointed effort in educating yourself and having difficult conversations with people and really, expanding your mind and your worldview. There's a reason why, this movement is happening. There's a reason why we're seeing it happen across the country, and there's a reason why we're seeing it happen now. So I would just challenge everyone, I'm not talking about one specific party or anything, to really work hard to educate yourselves. Go to the sources. That's the most important part of this. Go to the original sources. We've put some names out there. We've talked about Derek Bell. We've talked about Kimberly Crenshaw, and so on and so forth. Go to the sources, read their works, watch some documentaries, have some conversations, talk to your classmates, talk to your neighbors, so on and so forth. And don't just listen to what is being purported or reported to you. Educate yourselves. And I'm saying this as a journalist, right? Educate yourselves, do the reading, have the conversations, do the research, and actually understand what is happening. Because again, I will repeat myself here, if we don't understand the past, we are going to repeat it.
Yeah, and to Brittany's point, you can't just educate yourself off social media. Okay, it's dangerous. I don't care how eloquent it sounds, and I almost don't care who wrote it, right? You need to fact check. You need to Google things. There are organizations, if you don't want to read the bill, no matter how short or long, there are organizations who read those bills and digest them, have them on their website. You have ACLU, you have SPLC, you have Mississippi Votes, and many other nonprofits who do this and distribute this information. But I recognize, you have to know about the organizations to get that information. Reach out to your elected officials, Democrat, Republican, or in between. Make sure you're trying to communicate with them. They have emails, they have, phone numbers. Call their offices, get engaged. No one's asking you to run for office, so show up at the Capitol, right? But, these concepts that you see on the news and folks going back and forth about it, it's something there. And we all need to really, know about it. Representative Bell mentioned BVAP. That's Black Voting Age Population. For those who don't know, basically that elected official didn't want more Black people in their district. Right? Back to what we were saying before. Want to maintain power. To the question about the political aspect of it and midterms coming up, it's all a coordinated effort. They decide, before the legislative session, what we're going to bring up to rally up the base, to get people out, get them excited so we can have some messaging when we get closer to November and tell them what we've done and why they should keep us in power, because we're doing, we're protecting their interests, right? So it's all connected. You will hear about the successes of the GOP or the majority when campaign season come around. It's not just midterms. It's for your local mayors. It's for your your governor, your lieutenant governor, the real big races, the Senate, the House of Representatives, in the United States House. So, gotta pay attention. We also gotta vote. We got to show up and vote. I know we always in every call we're talking about how important it is to vote. You got to register to vote, right? Before I came to law school, I was pretty involved with voter registration and getting folks registered to vote. And I would always get the question from more seasoned folks why young people don't vote or why young people have not registered to vote. And I turn around and ask them, well, these are your kids and your grandkids. I should be asking you why they ain't registered to vote, right? My kids gonna vote. I ain't got none now, but they gonna vote. So, it's all connected. We got to vote at the end of the day. At the beginning of the day, before we get the vote, we got to educate ourselves because we got to know what we voting on. We got to encourage people to get involved and show up, not just for presidential campaigns. Because Joe Biden ain't in Mississippi right now. But Kamala Harris will be here tomorrow. But be in Mississippi tomorrow. But those offices are important, but for different reasons. Our local elected officials are the ones who are maintaining the day-to-day, the road that almost tore your tire up. Okay, your education system that your children are attending. That's your local elected officials, and we got to make sure we get involved. We're asking questions and really making an impact in our state. And the more we do that, the more we push the envelope, Mississippi will get better, I believe.
Thank you all so very much for this wonderful discussion regarding critical race theory. On behalf of the lead committee chairperson, Linda Webster, and the president of the Jackson, Mississippi Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, President Gwendolyn Handy, we appreciate you spending your time with us this evening. We would like to remind you that tomorrow is I Got Five on It Friday, which means that in support of our HBCU campaign, when they see us, we simply ask that you make a $5 donation. A $5 donation will help ensure Mississippi HBCU's fiscal stability to thrive and survive on the foundation and purpose of HBCUs. And so you can participate in that I Got Five on It Friday by texting HBCU to 53555. Again, that's HBCU to 53555. And tomorrow starts a new month. And so we ask all Rusk College Bearcats to come out and support and make donations to the When They See Us HBCU campaign. $5 can go a long way, and there are a lot of Fridays in the month of April. We ask that you support our goal to reach $100,000 to be divided out among the 5 four-year institutions of historically Black colleges and universities in the state of Mississippi. Thank you all so very much for your time today. Be on the lookout in your emails for an evaluation of tonight's Lead Mentee Social Action Forum on Is Critical Race Theory All That Critical? Thank you for your time, and we hope that you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank y'all.
No doubt. Appreciate it. Put 5 on some mosquito spray in this Capitol. All over the place.